Hey guys, this is Mr. Kellogg here. I'm just going to do a really quick tutorial for you on tagging to use for our projects with Time Glider. And this is going to be a really short and brief take on it. We're going to be delving a lot deeper into this later, but I just want to give you just a short explanation for what it is that we're going to be doing with tagging and how it works. As you can see, the pictures that I have here, a couple different examples. You'll notice over here on the Fox 8 New Orleans Twitter feed here that they use a couple hashtags, and I'm using hashtags as a good way to show you what a tag is, because hashtags are sort of the way that we do this socially, and it's a great thing. It really actually teaches us a lot about how to categorize and how to organize our thoughts. But specifically, you can notice for this, they are talking about the World War II Museum having a new exhibit. They put hashtag news and hashtag NOLA, so they labeled this tweet with the fact that it was a news story and that it happened in New Orleans. You can see below that World Series, in case you forgot, the Red Sox won the World Series, and but they have here hashtag World Series. That was for people who were talking about it on Twitter or on Instagram or on Facebook, to have them discussing what they're watching and what they're seeing and getting a way to engage their audience. So that's another example. And then up here on the right, this is what you guys are probably most used to, which is Instagram. And this is a friend of mine who uses a lot of hashtags in his Instagramming, and he specifically is in New Zealand, so he's got all these really specific hashtags to what's going on in terms of the water, that people are jumping into the ocean, that it's in New Zealand, and that just the different feelings that are being had there. So another example of that. Basics of tagging. The biggest question with tagging is, what is the main idea? And we really want to focus on this when we're thinking about any tagging for anything we're doing. We want to focus on what the main idea is. So with that, we want to think about, what's a summary of it? What is the most basic, most important elements about this? And also, if we boil it down, if we took something and we boil it down to the most important parts, what are they? And that'll really help us understand how to add tags as labels to different things, whether it's photographs, in this case events in a timeline, or events on a map, and it'll help us to understand that. This right here, this is obviously a grocery store aisle, and this is something, one way to think about how tagging works. Obviously, you see there's a lot of Oreo cookies on these shelves, and you'll also notice that specifically the Oreos are not just by themselves. They're around other types of Oreos and other similar cookies like this. The way that a grocery store is organized is to work with your mind in terms of categorizing what you would find and allowing you to know where you should go to find specific things. Okay, so when you're going down the grocery aisle and you're looking for cookies, you go to the cookie aisle where it says cookies on the sign, and you know to look specifically in the right area of where that specific kind is. If we look at some vegetables here, I know that those are going to be in an area where there's refrigeration. I know that they're going to be near other vegetables that are similar, that are leafy greens or whatever they might be. They'll be probably near maybe some fruit, some apples. The apples themselves we could categorize in different ways, right? So we have all the different colors. So we have orange over here. We've got different red ones. We've got different green ones coming in here. We could label them as those colors. We could label them by how crisp or how sweet they are, by what their names are, by where their country of origin is. We could label them all in those different ways, but in the grocery store specifically, they're organized to help us to see that visually right away. So obviously with colors, that's a big part of it, but also physically what space they need to be in, whether or not they're refrigerated or not, for example. So that's one how we can tag things. Two big parts of this that I want you to think about for our exercise right now is thinking of it as future you. Now, this is basically the way to think about tagging, especially with your notes, and if you're in Evernote doing notes, is to make sure that you're thinking, what will I think of when I want to see this thing in a year, or in 2 years, or in a month? The future me is going to think back and think of what specific words to describe this thing. Okay, so we want to think about words, specifically in language, obviously. And we also need to make sure that we're thinking about how to categorize. And that's the big thing to take away from the earlier slides is how do we categorize our food? How do we categorize where we find those things? Because ultimately that's why the grocery store is a good analogy for this, because you're trying to find something. Same thing with tags. If you're trying to find specific things, you're going to look back and think of specific words, and these tags will help you to find them. Tags are really helpful for making connections. And this is especially with our project. We're trying to make connections between various events. So we want to think of what labels, what words we can apply that not only are going to describe that thing, but also might apply to other events on our timeline. So we're thinking about not just, basics, World War II as a tag for something, but also things like what type of event is it? Is it a battle? Is it a bombing? Maybe it is an executive order, right? You can tag these things so that later on you can come back to them, but also so that you can see the connections. So if you looked for all of the events with bombing attached to them, you'll be able to see the different times when places were bombed. With that, if you look for bombing and you look for United States, you might find specifically when the USA was bombing other countries or was bombed themselves. And you can start to see that by adding tags, your future self will be able to see the connections, but also you'll have to have a better idea of what the events are themselves. So as you're thinking about this, you want to add 2 to 3 very basic tags about what your event is. And again, it comes back to what is the main idea. Main idea is the key. Okay? This will be the way that you want to think about it. And again, think about future you. What is future you going to think of when they want to look back at that? And also, how can you connect this event to other events? What similarities do they have, and how do they interact with each other? Okay, so this is a really basic talk about tagging. We're going to get much more in depth with this when we talk about Diigo, and we talk more about Evernote. But it's an essential skill that you guys probably are used to from your social media, but something that you're going to have to continue to build on to understand how to add labels. Okay, so feel free to ask any questions you want on Edmodo, and let us know what you think. All right, thanks guys.